Are you ready?
Jody?
She's not going to be here.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
so we'll call this special meeting for the Brown Act, Public Record Act, and Best Practices for Council Members Training. And if you'll please silence your cell phone and stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Okay, Dina, roll call.
Roll call. Vice Mayor Bolin? Here. Councilmember Culleton? Here. Councilmember Jones is absent. Councilmember Tryon? Here. And Mayor Crowder.
Here.
Thank you.
We also might want to notice that Ron is in the audience too, so that way it's on the record that he went through this.
Oh, and note, as Councilmember Tryon stated, that Councilmember-elect Lassonde is in the audience. Thank you.
So with that, we'll turn it over to our town attorney.
Wonderful. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members and councilmember-elect. This is a brief summary of a couple of different concepts. One of them is the AB 1234 training that you need every other year.
Does satisfy that requirement?
It does not, because that requirement needs to be 2 hours. Now, this will get you about an hour of that, and I can fill you in on the missing hour of that, at another date. So this will get you halfway there. But unless I do the other half, you'll have to sit through someone else's full session.
I think I'm good for another year.
Okay, good. We're going to hit three concepts: the Brown Act, Public Records Act, and best practices for council members. We're going to hit the Brown Act real quick. I'm not going to hit all of the components of it. Much of it you already know. Much of it, I would say much of it is intuitive, but it really isn't. Some of it is intuitive, some of it is not. These are just the rules that the government has set up. Ironically, the legislature set this up as a mandate for you. They are not required to follow the Brown Act. Of course. Amazingly enough. It's a crazy concept, I know, but I always highlight that. You have to follow it. The legislature who ordered it does not. Public Records Act, again, we all have to comply with, and again, we'll get into some of that real quick. I'm going to go through these really quickly. If you have a question, if you have a thought, a comment, please stop me, and we'll focus on that. But I'm going to go through these pretty quick. Because these, for example, the Brown Act, by and large, I have a 2-hour presentation on just the Brown Act. Not that you all need a 2-hour presentation on it, but if you'd like it, I'm happy to give it at some
That's just riveting.
It is really, we give you the whole seat, but you only need the edge. It's just really, it'll keep you right there on the edge of your seat. So the Brown Act was enacted in '53 in response to local elected officials that were avoiding dealing with the public. They were avoiding making decisions in the public. They were essentially having study sessions and workshops, and literally they were having meetings at bars to make decisions. And then when they would show up, item would come up, no discussion, boom, vote on it, it's done. And so the legislature created the Brown Act with the intent to ensure that the public has a right to see your deliberations, how it is you deliberate. We'll get to, now there's a limit as to how much they get to get into your mind on your deliberations, but this act has been amended by the courts and interpreted by the courts. I don't know how many cases, there are tons of cases on the Brown Act. Legislative bodies that are subject to the act, governing bodies of local agencies, including town council, standing committees that you have, not ad hoc committees, but standing committees, committees for an indefinite purpose or for a definite purpose, but for an indefinite period of time. Those are subject to the Brown Act. If you have an ad hoc committee that's very short and a finite duration, the way you set it up is likely not going to be subject to the Brown Act. But we'll get into that in a little bit. Anything that is done by a fixed formal action of the council, any like planning commission, things you set up, those are all subject to the Brown Act. A meeting is any gathering of a majority of the members covered by the act, and this is important, to hear, discuss, or deliberate on matters within the covered body jurisdiction. If I for example, if I had a child that was getting married and I invited you all to come to the wedding and you all show up at the wedding that we do just in someplace here in town, you are not subject to the Brown Act. Now, I would caution you, just because you're there, don't talk shop, right? It's a wedding. Talk about the wedding. Don't talk about, business. If you talk about business, you may be subject to the Brown Act, regardless of where you are. Okay? And I say beware of serial meetings. I think the next slide actually talks about serial meetings. A serial meeting is not as dangerous with 5 members on the council. It's more dangerous with 7 or 9. And the reason why is a serial meeting is I talk to one member, and then I talk to another, and then I talk to another. A serial meeting is also I talk to one member, that member talks to another, that third member talks to a fourth, the fourth talks to a fifth. That's a serial meeting. Just because of the numbers, you don't have as big of an issue because you have 5. If I talk to one other person, if I'm on the council and I talk to one other council member, that's it. I can't talk to any more, right? And that council member knows, well, I've already talked to one. I don't get to talk to any more. It's really easy. Where it gets into trouble is where you have 7 or 9, where someone thinks, well, I've only talked to this council member. I can go talk to one more. But I don't know that that council member hasn't talked to others. And that's how you can quickly get into a Brown Act, a serial meeting under the Brown Act. And again, taking action means a collective decision or a promise by a majority to make a decision on an actual vote, a commitment to vote a certain way or to take a certain action. What is not a meeting? Staff communication with the council to provide information to you, clarifying information, meetings with the town manager. Those are not serial meetings. Now, I am going to guess, I have not deposed Kevin on this before, but I suspect Kevin has not said, now, how are you going to vote on item number 6B on the council today? I need to know. And then in the next meeting, now, council member, how are you going to vote on item 6B? I need to know. He gives you information, explains what do you need to know about it. Now, in many instances, it's going to be obvious how a certain member is going to vote, but the decision isn't made in the back room.
That's why he has one-on-one, Scott.
Well, no, I don't think it is. That's not the real reason why.
No,
I mean, for real. The decision.
Take a lot of temperatures, though.
Yeah, look, I understand that, and look, part of human communication is we naturally share our feelings. I mean, we share it on our faces. Sometimes we don't even have to say a word, right? And we know how people think. That doesn't mean that you can't have those communications. You can, but the important part is to make sure that the decision is made, that you keep an open mind until the item comes before the council in this setting. That's it. Okay? Now, it's also not a meeting if you have contacts with members of the public and they tell you how they think and you have a conversation with them about some matter. That isn't going to count. But again, be careful, because sometimes you may have, and I've had this. I have, for those of you who don't know, I am 2 days away from finishing my final term as a school board member. I have been serving for 18 years. I finally have been paroled. Or graduated, or whatever term you want to put on it. I'm done. I decided to not run again. But I have had developers who have come and said, hey, listen, we're thinking about doing a development here. And ironically, this is many years ago, they said, we'd like to build the school for you. Great. What do you think about that? Well, now we're in danger zone. You can't ask me what I think about it. Make your proposal. I can tell you where I think some potholes are going to be, but I can't tell you how I'm going to vote. I can't tell you what I feel about it. Now, they could probably tell I thought it was a great idea because we didn't have to do a lot of the bidding and all the, labor code compliance. We got someone else to do that. But they could figure out how I was thinking. But when they asked, I said, I'm not going to tell you whether I think that's a great idea or not. I'm going to tell you some of the things you have to solve along the way. So those things are technically not meetings. Social media. Can you get in a Brown Act problem in social media? Yeah. Recently, the FPPC just fined a bunch of people for going on Facebook and you had a member of the public that would complain about something, and then you had council members that were responding. They even fined a council member who responded with an emoji, right? And I think the emoji was thumbs up. Because guess what that implies? I'm going to vote yes on that. That's a good idea, right? Now, I'm just telling you, for good, bad, or indifferent, the FPPC is single-handedly trying to balance the budget by issuing fines to politicians. They're not going to make it, but they're giving it a good try. And another instance in a group I represented previously, many years ago, an individual voted on something where they had a financial conflict of interest. And I won't bore you with all the details, but they didn't know they had a financial conflict of interest. They co-signed on a home, and that home was within, it was listed as one of the APNs on this property, on a development. And that council member voted in favor of some action, and he got fined $3,000. Didn't even know that his kid's property was one of those APN numbers. I don't know my APN number, much less one for a home I co-signed, which I haven't done yet, ever. Haven't had the pleasure of having a kid hit me up for that yet, but yet I'm sure it's coming someday. But regardless, that doesn't matter to them. What you know sometimes doesn't really matter. And by someone putting in a thumbs up emoji doesn't mean they're approved, saying yes, I'm going to vote a certain way. But the FPPC said, yeah, it kind of indicates that, so we're going to fine you for it. So be careful on social media. I will tell you the best policy on social media. If it has to do with friends or family, if it has to do with a picture of someone canoeing or rafting or having fun, comment all you want. If it has to do with any business that may come before the town, don't comment.
So Kevin sends information, accident over on wherever and power's out.
Yep.
What should our response be? I mean, I've been very nervous about even responding back other than saying thank you for the information at the most.
Yeah,
That's all right for us to do, and
that is okay to do. Because it's not something that is likely going to come before you. If there's an accident somewhere and the power is out, really the only job is getting the power restored. Well, that's not necessarily the town's issue, because you don't run the power company. But again, if you have questions, or you can certainly ask. What I would recommend is if you have follow-up questions, if Kevin, and I assume you're talking about like a text message.
correct.
So if you get a group text message, and I know that it's fairly common to send those, because it's just easy for communication. If you have a follow-up question, I would start a new thread directly to Kevin and say, Kevin, I got a question. Can you clarify X, Y, and Z?
Away from the rest of the council.
Kevin may then go back to that thread for the whole council and say, a question was raised about X, Y, and Z. Here's the answer, right? But the best practice would be just directly respond.
Good idea.
If you have, hey, I want some more information on this, because then you don't have a Brown Act problem.
Right.
And Kevin and I are pretty good about fishing those out. We can push information without trying to give decision-making leanings in them, if I can use that term.
It's just always weird. I mean, even though it's a power thing, but it might have been an accident on a curb. We know it's a problem, and we're not taking care of it.
Yep.
Like the public thinks we should, and all of a sudden they find this thread, and it's, well, you did
Yeah.
know about it, and here it is. And so anyway, we just gotta be careful.
Is there a reasonable period of time in any of this? So let's say, hypothetically, I'm a new councilman, I talk to Greg about some building aspect of something, or, because that's what he does. And then, 3 years later, there is a subdivision that we have to vote on in that area. Is there like a length of time?
Not described in the Brown Act, but I can tell you there is sort of a rule of reasonability.
Okay.
If you think that there's some discussion that you had that might, again, if it's just the two of you, it's not a problem, right? But I have always said this, the best disinfectant is disclosure. If you think there's a problem, disclose it. Because what happens with the Brown Act is if you disclose those conversations, remember the rule is you can't make a decision outside of view of the public. So if you tell the public, hey, by the way, I had a conversation with the developer has a project on the agenda today, I just want you to know what we talked about. What we talked about was X, Y, and Z. You then have disclosed it. The public now knows about your conversation. No violation. None whatsoever. Because you've given the information to the public that you got from your conversation. Right? Now, sometimes people will interpret that and say, well, gee, Councilmember Tryon likes to have conversations outside of the public. I don't think really that happens very often. But again, just beware. The public may make a comment about it. To me, I say big deal, right? Meeting agendas, you all know that everything you take action on has to be on an agenda. You can't take action on anything that's not on an agenda. There are ways for us to get stuff on an agenda if urgency permits, and I won't go through all the details of that, but we have done that before. Any change in management compensation, contracts for your town manager have to be on a regular meeting, and the contract has to be posted with the agenda. Or you have to disclose the terms of it at that meeting and say, copies of the contract are available over on the counter. Okay. Council member comments, you can provide a brief report on activities, make a brief announcement, subject to the rules of a legislative body, of the legislative body. You can ask to have items placed on a future agenda. There's a time for that on the agenda, not a problem. You can respond to public comments, although I will tell you the best response I've highlighted here as most effective. If some member of the public raises an issue, you can make a brief comment or ask about it. The most effective is the second one. Refer the matter to staff or other sources for factual information. One of my clients in years past, it was the City of Ontario. The mayor was great at this. People would come up and say, I've got a problem with this, that, and the other. And he would say, oh, would you hold on? Hey, the public works director's right over here. Would both of you go outside right now and go talk about that? And literally people would be directed right to the source on the spot, and it was sometimes awkward, but it was always effective because then individuals standing in this position behind the podium, they know, hey, my problem is going to be resolved or at least heard by the very department head who's over that issue, right? Something to think about. You can request a staff report at a future meeting. You can also place the matter on a future agenda. But again, most effective, refer it to the staff member responsible for that subject right at the meeting. It's highly effective, and quite frankly, the public likes it. Closed session meetings, you all know that we can have closed session meetings for, there is a list of them, and this is not a complete list, but these are the most common. Personnel matters, litigation matters, property negotiations, labor negotiations. There are safe harbor descriptions. You can get in trouble if we put an item on closed session that isn't described just right, but if we use the safe harbor descriptions, and I will tell you, I always use the safe harbor descriptions. There's no issue with having a closed session for one of those matters. Okay? Of course, before the meeting, before the closed session, and after the closed session, first you need to disclose we're going into closed session. Here are the items we're going to talk about. And afterwards, you have to come out and reconvene to open session, and you have to disclose any action that was taken. The most frequent disclosure is there was no action taken or no reportable action taken in closed session. Typically, you'll be giving direction. We want attorney, we want you to follow up to do this, or town manager, we want you to do that, or this is how we want you to handle labor negotiations, right? Pretty easy. Those are usually the disclosures or the actions that require a no reportable action taken in closed session. Okay, the Act prohibits unauthorized disclosure of confidential information. You are not free to talk about closed session matters with anybody, except when you're in closed session and only with those who are supposed to be there. You don't have to do this. You can however you want to handle it. But my wife will frequently ask me, so how was it? So what happened? And if she asks me about closed session stuff, I always just say, honey, I could tell you, but then of course, either you'd have to kill me or I'd have to kill you. And let's just not do that, right? I have even had individuals stand up to fight each other in closed session. And when I was asked about it afterwards, I'm not telling you what happened in closed session. I can't.
Sounds like our meeting.
Oh,
Oh, Greg.
not even close. Not even close.
Kidding.
I have had this.
Old days.
I have had this difficult task before, where someone was disclosing literally photos of memos that I was handing out in closed session. And there are ways that I can figure out who is doing that. Don't make me do that, please. Just don't disclose it, right? There are court remedies that will allow for the removal of a council member from close, or a prohibition of a council member going into closed session if you are found to be disclosing information. It is a big deal and really important, particularly because you're dealing with labor negotiations, you're dealing with personnel matters, you're dealing with litigation. Some of the things that were disclosed in my instance were litigation matters that was literally giving the other side advantages in a court proceeding. And it's like, you're going to cost this public agency money by doing that. What are you doing? And, you know, if you do have those inklings where you feel like you want to talk about it, come talk to me and let me know. Okay, rights of the public at meetings. And again, I'm going through this just pretty quickly because I want to get to what I think is the more weighty matters here. But the public has a right to attend. They have a right to access the meeting records. They have a right to record the proceedings. You cannot stop them from recording. Having said that, you can stop them from recording if they have like bright lights that are shining. They can't interrupt the meeting either with their lighting or with their technical needs. They can just record as long as it doesn't disturb others around them. They have a right to participate, but they don't have a right to disrupt the meeting. They have I said this once, and it just kind of blurted out, and I didn't really think about it when I said it. And I kind of have used this phrase afterwards when someone just shouts to interrupt people, I will sometimes comment, hey, this is not a ball game. You don't get to just make any comment at any time like, hey, batter. You get to sit and watch the council deliberate. And if you don't like it, you can watch from home. You can make whatever comments you want at home and scream at the TV. You're not going to do that here. Okay? So they do have a right to participate. They don't have a right to disrupt.
Scott,
Yes.
on that filming thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I get it with bright lights, but what if like they're up walking all around and they come up here and start filming the
Nope.
public? That would be disruptive too.
That will be disruptive.
And what rights does the public speaker have?
Well, a public speak.
Well, it's a public forum, so.
It's a public forum. They don't have a right to demand to not be recorded. What I would ask you to do is, if you think that something is going wrong, this is one of the areas you can get into trouble very quickly. So what I would suggest is, if you think something is going wrong, pass me a note, send me a text message, or just pause the meeting and just say, hey, can we go talk outside for a minute? And let me know, and I will deal with it. I'll deal with it every time. And sometimes I'll let you know, hey, listen, what they're doing is okay. If someone is just standing in the back, walking around in the back, not much you can do about that. But if they're walking up towards the dais, we can absolutely do something about that. As of January 1, by the way, it's much easier to do something about that. I won't get into all the details of it, but a new law was passed that makes it easier to remove a disruptive person from a meeting. And it gives you certain protections for doing it. Every meeting agenda has to have, every regular meeting agenda has to have the public ability to comment on non-agenda items. In every meeting, for every item that's on the agenda, if a member of the public wants to talk about that item, they're entitled to. Now, as we've done sometimes here before, on the consent calendar, if someone says, well, I want to talk about all the items, we don't then deal with each item individually. They can talk about the group, but they don't get 3 minutes per item, because if there were 30 items, or 30 items that have 90 minutes, they get 3 minutes on all of the consent as a whole. Now, if council pulls an item from consent, then they can talk about that specific item separately. Does that make sense? Okay.
And 3 minutes is the nominal time, it's the absolute time, how do you come up with 3 minutes?
Well, the council passed a rule that said that each individual gets 3 minutes to speak on an agenda item. Now, if there are 3 different items that I want to speak on, then I get 3 minutes per item. Now, I don't get them all at the same time. I don't get 9 minutes. I get, when item number 6B comes up, I get 3 minutes on 6B. When item 6F comes up, then I can come back up and I get 3 minutes on that one. You see what I mean? Okay. Remedies for a Brown Act violation. The most common is cure and correct. If someone thinks there's a Brown Act violation, they can send a notice saying, I think there's a Brown Act violation, you have an opportunity to cure and correct. We'll deal with that notice and we'll figure out, was there a violation? Do we need to put the item back on the agenda for what's called a cure and correct? It has happened for other agencies before. It isn't a huge deal, but I have on occasion found the need to place an item back on the agenda. I'll disclose it. Hey, listen, these council members inadvertently spoke and they didn't know that it was a council that had 7 members on it. These 2 members spoke with this member. That member, not realizing that there were 2 others, spoke with someone else, and there was multiple communications going on. So we're bringing the item back for disclosure of what they said, and here we are. And you vote on it again, and then it's over. Then it's cured. Technically, a violation of the act is a misdemeanor. I have never seen one prosecuted. Never. Now, real quick, I want to get into ethics. There's a difference between ethics, which is what we ought to do, and ethics laws, which is what we must do. The ethics laws that the legislature has passed, we've got to follow. Okay? Really quickly, the reason why you should care is because they can give you fines, penalties, in some instances, criminal enforcement. Okay? Again, very seldom have I seen criminal enforcement. Typically, you get penalties, and really what it does is it gives members of the public the ability to throw stones at you. And that's never a great idea. These are the really big ones. Ethical issues under personal financial gain, bribery, self-dealing, and employment-related restrictions. Self-dealing is big. I don't know many people who are really going to be subject to taking bribes. Okay, but we all know what that is. It's the gift of money to one person under the table for some action, for some official action. Okay, don't do that. The bigger one, and it doesn't come up very often, but is self-dealing. If a council member has a particular, let me pick on you for a minute. You're a developer, right? You're a builder. You could not come in and say, Councilmember Boland, you could not come in and say, okay, the city contracts are all coming to my firm now for construction. You don't get to direct those to yourself. In fact,
Washington DC gets to, but we don't get to.
but remember,
I
the
know,
rulemakers
I know.
aren't subject to the rules.
I didn't
right?
say that.
The NSA may be watching or listening,
right.
or both. Self-dealing is a big problem. It doesn't come up very often anymore. It hasn't. It's been outlawed for a long time. Government Code 1090. If you have an interest in a contract with a public agency and you sit on that public agency, not only is a contract not voidable but void, but you also will be required to disgorge all the money you received, even if you bought goods and services or provided labor. You'll essentially be doing that for free. Okay, so the remedies are pretty harsh. Employment-related restrictions, you can't come in and say, hey, I'm going to step off the council now and you're going to hire me as your community development director. Can't happen. There's a 12-month restriction on employment. Some of the perks that come about do create some ethical issues. Compensation is one. The only compensation you're entitled to is the official compensation you get from the town. You cannot go to, for example, the Key Club or the Kiwanis Club and demand an honoraria of $1,000 for a speech. A former president can do that, but a former mayor cannot. Okay? You can't use public resources for your own personal benefit. Not so hypothetically speaking. If you were moving from one place to another, you could not come in and say, hey, I'm going to borrow that flatbed truck from Public Works over the weekend. Is that because I got stuff I need to do? Again, not so hypothetically speaking, someone actually did that, and that's a big problem. Okay, next is gifts. Gifts is one where you really need to be careful. You can accept gifts up to, as of 2022, up to $520 per year per source, but you have to disclose it. And the disclosure is really key on all of this. We'll get into some.
Every gift you need to disclose?
Every gift except for gifts that are from family members, except for gifts that are from like business associates, where you have a business relationship. Like, for example, one of my law partners is a whiskey aficionado. I bought a bottle of whiskey for him last year. He's not required to disclose that. We're business partners, so that's not necessary. Now, if I gave one of you a bottle of whiskey that was worth that value, you'd have to disclose it, right? And then there are some, coming into the new year, there are some prohibitions against voting on any items that would relate to the
I
giver.
thought it
of
was
the
over a certain amount of money that you had to disclose it if it was under that amount.
Yeah, there is a number, and it's quite low.
Yeah, just go,
I want to say it's $50.
yeah.
I think
That's what I remember.
I think it's even lower than that.
might even be lower than that. I'll get the number for you, but there is a number.
But if we gave each other Christmas gifts, that's not a big deal.
That's not a big deal, particularly if you give each other gift. For example, let me use it. I'm going to take it out of that scenario, but because you're giving gifts to each other, it's okay as long as the gifts are reasonably approximate, similar value. For example, I go to lunch all the time with some individuals from a public agency in Southern California, and every time we go, we rotate who pays. Now, as long as it's not, hey, we're going to Ruth Chris when I pay, but we're going to McDonald's when someone else is paying, as long as it's reasonably approximate, you don't have to worry about this rotation thing, just as long as you keep the rotation going. You don't have to insist on, okay, everybody separate bills, separate. There's some reasonability in this stuff. Where there isn't reasonability is when it relates to entertainment, like concert tickets, sporting event tickets. If you're given tickets to an event, you either have to disclose the amount if it's under $520 total, or the simplest thing is you write a check and pay for it, right? The other one is
So you're
certain
saying
kinds
if
of,
it's under $520, you do not have to disclose it?
no, you have to disclose it,
Okay.
but if you pay for it, you don't. But if it's under $520 total, you have to disclose it. You do have to disclose it. The problem comes in typically tickets don't come just as a one-off. Usually you get a pair of them, or you get 4 of them. I had, in my capacity as a school board member, one of our legal team, the firm that we utilize for legal services, called me and said, "Hey, I've got 4 tickets to a Sacramento Kings game. I know your kids like basketball. Would you like them?" And my response was, "I would love them, but only if I write a check for them, because I would rather not disclose it at all. I just wouldn't. I don't want to disclose that I got Kings tickets. I'll pay for them. Now, these were really good season tickets, and I paid face value for them. Had he sold them on the open market, he could have gotten a lot more for them. You don't have to do that. You just have to pay face value. Okay?
Can you pay less?
You cannot pay less. Any amount less that you pay needs to be disclosed as a gift, right? If they're $200 and you pay $150, you disclose $50.
So, I get that for like with people that we're gonna do business with,
Yep.
or something here.
Yep.
Like I work at the Performing Arts Center,
Yep.
managing that. The ballet is in here this weekend. And I have a relationship with the ballet, and because I work there, I'm offered tickets for my family
Sure.
to come to the ballet.
Sure.
That I don't have to pay for.
Right.
That has nothing to do with my job here, right?
Right.
It's part of your compensation, isn't it?
Pardon me?
Isn't it part of your
No.
compensation?
No.
I actually would put it under the umbrella of your compensation where you work. I would call it like a gratuity related to your compensation.
Yeah, which is what it is.
Yeah, it's a gratuity related to your compensation. It's not related to here. So
No, it
you
has
would,
nothing to do with it.
yeah, so you would, in my opinion, you wouldn't have to disclose that.
Okay, I have similar, my wife is on the board for the symphony, and she gets free tickets for family. She gives me a ticket, still, has nothing to do with this job.
Nope.
Yeah.
Yep, you're okay there. The one that's a big one, commercial travel providers, airlines, trains, travel agents. If they give you tickets for an airplane, you need to pay for it. Okay? You can't disclose that and get around it. There's a unique law that relates to that, and I'm gonna give you. Do you all remember PSA Airlines?
Yeah.
PSA Airlines, I kid you not, flying out of San Diego Airport. San Diego Airport has a major renovation of a hangar for PSA, big old ribbon cutting, everything wonderful, champagne flowing. Hey everybody, let's get on a plane. We'll take off. We're going to do a San Diego Bay tour, and we're going to come back right here and land. Wonderful. Plane is loaded with public officials. And the FPPC secures some criminal convictions.
Wow.
They disqualified some individuals from ever holding office again, and they fined others. And I don't know, I didn't dig into why they did which for who, but it was determined, even though the argument was, we didn't go anywhere. We took off and landed at the same place. Doesn't matter. It's a commercial air carrier. You got a ride. You didn't pay for it.
So that's what happened to PSA.
That's what happened. And you know what? PSA tried to pay for legal representation and made it worse in some instances, because then they had to disclose, yeah, I got legal representation from PSA. PSA felt really bad. They weren't trying to get, they weren't.
So what happened, because there's no ticket value.
Mm-hmm.
So what do you determine a value?
There is a value. And the value is, what is the hourly cost of that plane? How long was it going around for, divided by how many passengers? That's the value. Because if you want to, and that's actually lesson learned. That's what PSA should have done. They should have said,
Right.
tickets on this flight are $10 a piece.
Right. Good, that would have been workable.
That would have been workable. That would have been legal.
Had it been real.
Had that been the
Real.
actual price, right? Anyway, again, you need,
Scott,
Yep.
okay, but what if PSA said, look, we're gonna donate the fuel or the plane or something? Like there are organizations and companies that donate things to cities and towns and municipalities. How do you get around that?
so this is related to travel companies.
Okay, all right.
Travel companies have this restriction. And to be candid, you don't want to mess with it. You just don't.
So,
Yep.
so if one of us was to go up in a CAL FIRE helicopter
Mhm.
to survey a fire somewhere,
Yeah.
not the same thing at all.
That's totally different. That is connected to your job. You're surveying fire damage that you have some responsibility to manage.
And that's not a commercial.
They're also, CAL FIRE is also not a commercial. They're another governmental entity. The reporting is $50. And I'll verify that, but I'm pretty sure that's right. Limit is $520 per year for this year. Now, the FPPC has said that they will adjust it every year by $10 per year. They have been really good at doing it every other year by $20. So I have not seen on the front page of their website, they should have a link to what the amount is. And last time I checked, about 2 weeks ago, it was still $520 for 2022. They haven't updated it for 2023. I suspect they're not going to. I suspect they will wait till the end of 23, and they'll tell you that 2024 will be $540, but that's just a guess. Okay, but right now it's $520.
And that's per entity,
Yes. Yep.
okay, per year, per entity.
Yes. Now, there are exceptions for some kind of travel, particularly paid for by the agency. If you all go to League of California Cities down in Long Beach, this agency can pay for your airfare. Not a problem. They can pay for your hotel. Not a problem. That's not a gift. That's you performing the service in your capacity. Now, if the league were to say, hey, we'll pay for your airfare because we want you down here as a speaker, what I would suggest is have the league pay the town, and then the town pays. So there are ways to make things happen like that. But again, the big problem is some of these violations may be disqualifying. Okay? They may be disqualifying. And I can see we're going to have to pick up the pace a little bit here. Beware of people's innocent attempts at nice gestures, because on the back end, they're always going to want something from you as a council member. They just will. You guys know about the financial interest disclosure. You have to fill out a Form 700 upon taking office, annually while you're in office, and then as you leave the office. Okay? Any questions about the Brown Act so far? Nope. Okay. Let's keep moving. California Public Records Act.
Oh, boy.
This is a good one here. And I'm going to tell you, just like I suggest with, were I a tax preparer, I would tell you, you should judiciously follow the tax code and, as much as legally possible, reduce your tax exposure, right? With the Public Records Act, you should judiciously follow the Public Records Act and not create records as much as possible. Why? Because then there's nothing to disclose. Okay, so with that as sort of an overarching umbrella, let's talk about it. The purpose of the CRA is that the legislature, they find and declare that the access to information or transparency is really great for the conduct of the people's business, and this is important, it's a fundamental and necessary right of every person in this state. Now, I will tell you, person does not just mean person, and in this state does not mean in this state. I hate to say it, person means any corporation, any entity, any organization, they can ask for documents. In this state doesn't have to be within the walls of the borders of California. You can be on Mars, and if you file a Public Records Act request in California, they will have to respond. Now, they don't have to mail it to Mars, they'd have to figure out how to get it there, right? But in this, you can't say, wait a minute, you're not in this state, so I don't have to respond to you, okay? Now, you don't really have to worry about responding. The staff will respond on your behalf, but you may be required to search your own devices for records or your own computer for records. I'm going to blow through this really, really quick. Again, the CPRA doesn't govern the use of records. You can't say, well, why do you want the documents? We need to know why you want them. They're entitled to them. You can't really ask why they want them, okay? It applies to state and local agencies, particularly the town. Reasonable efforts have to be utilized to locate the requested records. You have to review any record indexes you may have, and asking knowledgeable people in the agency, including council members, is required. You have to look in logical places for documents where you think they might be. You don't have to look in every single filing cabinet for every single document. The event you can't find something, you just have to say, I looked in the logical places where it may be, couldn't find it. But Dina knows all about that, right? Now, electronic records, there are some rules for these. Okay? There are requirements to keep records for a specific period of time. Software developed by the agency, which to my knowledge, we don't do that. That is not required to be disclosed, but the data that the software utilizes may be required to be disclosed. What is a public record? Any writing that is owned, used, or retained by the government agency in the conduct of its business, regardless of physical form or characteristic. If you have a voicemail that you have kept, if someone requests it, you have to give it. Now, it has to be related to public business. There are a lot of rules about it, but if you have an extension here at Town Hall, and someone leaves you a voicemail and you happen to say, hey, that's really nice, I'm going to keep that. If you keep it and someone requests a document and that's responsive, you may have to give it up.
What if it's on your personal cell phone?
No. Now, we're gonna get to that because that really is a trap for the unwary. We're gonna get to personal stuff here in just a minute. What is a writing? Any handwriting, typewriting, printing, photocopying, photograph. I mean, it goes on and on and on and on and on. It includes digital records. It includes digital files. It includes photos. It includes photocopies. If everything goes through what do they call it?
Scanner?
A scanner. It includes scanned copies as well, right? Okay, what is not a writing? First off, we're not required to create a document. Data may be included in a writing. Now let's talk about email. Email is expressly covered. Do you all have Town of Paradise email addresses? Okay. Your Town of Paradise email addresses will be required to follow the document retention policy. IT will take care of that for you. I highly recommend you use your Town of Paradise email for town business. Because then when someone requests documents, you can just say, go search my email. I don't use my personal email, go search the town email, right? I highly recommend it. You don't have to, it's not required. This isn't Cuba, right? However, there is a case out of the city of San Jose where council members were working with developers, and I mean intimate details of development agreements were being discussed through private email. An environmental group opposed to those developments said, we want all of the emails related to that development. And magically, there were none, or there were very few. And they, of course, said that's impossible. So they sued. And the California Supreme Court ultimately ruled if you're conducting official business on a personal device or through a personal email, you have to disclose those emails that are subject to the Public Records Act. Now, it doesn't mean you have to disclose personal emails about, yoga appointments or about, your family or doctor's appointments, but official business in your personal email may have to be disclosed. Now, when someone says, well, gee, I got an email, but I deleted it. Well, it may still be in the trash in your email. It may also be backed up on the cloud. If you have a backup of it, you're required to go get it. But many times it's not available. Let's talk about text messages. Text messages are covered under the California Public Records Act. But I deleted it, or I got rid of the text message. Well, maybe, but it's on my personal phone. Well, if you're doing text message about official business on your personal phone, it may be subject to the Public Records Act. You may have to disclose it. Now, can I give you maybe more than just a hint? If you want to talk to another council member or to another individual about town business, you can send a text message that says, are you clear for a call right now? Nothing else. You clear for a call? Are you available to talk in 5 minutes? That's it. No subject. Are you available to talk? Right? It's funny, when email first came about, I remember the discussion was, why in the world would I send an email when I could pick up the phone and call? And then email became so ubiquitous and we all just kind of use it. And now I'm telling you, let's get back to, why would I use an email or a text message when I could just call? And again, I'm not suggesting that you be nefarious and violate the Brown Act. I'm suggesting that you strictly comply with the Brown Act. And that you not create a record if you don't have to.
And police phone calls are not recorded except by NSA.
Right, and if the NSA wants to disclose it, be my guest. They can always go to the NSA, right? But that's, again, I'm suggesting strict compliance with the Public Records Act and with the Brown Act, right? You can be strategic about this. I recently, in my capacity as a board member, we had an individual, I won't name the position because I don't want to have this suddenly come into litigation that is imminent. We had an individual in a position who was awful at their job. And people would send text messages all the time, and I would get the text message and I would say, literally, I would call them and I'd say, would you stop? These are going to be disclosed and I don't want my name on this stuff. And you would get things like, can you believe that email that we got? How about you call me and you say that? Don't write it. Right? Because again, things like that will show up in discovery. Questions? Okay. The town received a request. Your only obligation is if we have a request for documents between any council member and any member of the public related to X, okay, we'll let you know about that, right? We'll say, hey, we got this. Can you please search your personal device? Let us know if you have anything. If you have text messages, we'll probably ask you to take a screenshot and send the screenshot over to Dina, okay? Again, if you can utilize your email, your town email, utilize it. You don't have to, but it's a lot easier because then we don't have to bother you.
So I think there's a couple of us that have the town email forwarded to a personal email.
Mhm.
Any problems there? They can still isolate it from the landing spot
Yes.
here? Okay.
So that's not a problem. You can have it forwarded to your personal email. If you respond, I would suggest that you respond from the town email because then again, we've got everything in that universe, right? But if it's forwarded to a personal email, then you respond from a personal email, you may have to give up those emails where you responded. You see what I'm saying? If you need it to be forwarded for some reason, for some technological reason, because it doesn't work with your phone or something, then utilize that just to, you know, for you to just see it and then remember, I need to go to my computer later and log in to respond if you can. I mean, I know it doesn't always work well, and I know I have not always obeyed this rule that I'm laying down right here. So I get it. You know, for a while, my own email server wouldn't allow me to connect to the school district email that I had. It was a royal pain. And so, but you know, I get it. But if you can, that's the best way to go.
I just want to say right now, everybody call me. I don't want to do email.
Okay.
No
Okay,
email.
there are certain exemptions for documents. Pending litigation is one, attorney-client privilege, attorney work product. These documents are not required to be disclosed, they're exempt. I will tell you, the attorney-client privilege, if you want a document out in the public and you say, hey, I'm willing to waive the attorney-client privilege, I will tell you right now, I am not likely to waive that privilege, and we both hold it. Okay? We both hold that privilege, and you can say, hey, I want this document out, and I'm going to say, I don't. That's only happened one time in my career. Someone wanted to use a document as a sword to really inflict pain on somebody. I mean, I don't mean a physical sword. I mean, and we just, our firm decided we're not okay waiving that privilege. Very seldom will that ever come up. Most documents that I will give you will say attorney work product privilege, attorney client privilege. What that means is, hey, don't give them out to people. If you want me to sometimes doctor something so that it's acceptable to be released, I am amenable to doing that. But in many instances, I don't want to lay out all of my legal analysis for an opponent in a memo, particularly if it relates to a project that may be the subject of litigation. Okay. There are penalties for failure to disclose records. The biggest one is that if someone says, if they know you sent a record, and this always is what scares Dina and I like crazy. If someone knows you sent a record and they ask us for a copy of it, and we say we have no records to disclose to you, and they know it, they know there's one out there because they've seen it. If they file litigation and literally they get records disclosed to them because of the litigation, they automatically get attorney's fees. The most recent case, and I think it's personally egregious, but the most recent case that was published by the 3rd District Court of Appeals, which is over this area, there were something like 17,000 documents that were disclosed. There were less than 20 that were not disclosed that this party knew about and they recognized weren't in the documents. They filed litigation. They got over $100,000 in attorney's fees for 20 pages or less than 20 pages of documents. Now, they were important documents that they knew about and that they wanted. But it's a big deal. So if someone asks for documents, they're probably going to get them. And if you have them and you don't want to give them up, tell us why. We may be able to find a reason to keep them private. But don't just hide them and say, oh, no, they don't exist. Nothing to see here. That's problematic. Okay? Questions about the Public Records Act? Okay. Let's jam ahead. We got 5 minutes, and I bet I can get this done.
Let's go.
I bet I can get it done. Part 3, best practices. Council, you operate as a unit. You are a 5-member unit. You are not individual council members with authority. You act as a group and as a body. Members should be tolerant of other viewpoints, particularly those which do not align with yours. It doesn't mean that someone else is wrong and that you're right, or that you're wrong and they're right. I will give you a quick instance of this. Once the council decides a matter, it should be adopted by the group and you should stand in solidarity. Let me give you an example of this. And I'll use myself as an example. In my school board years, about a handful of years ago, we had an issue come before the board. Students were going to the local community college to take a course, and they were transferring the credits back to the school. And the question was, well, do we give AP credit for that? And the credit bump, if you get an A, instead of it being a 4.0, you get a 5.0, right? The question was, well, do we give the credit bump? My 4 partners, my 4 colleagues, were dead wrong in their decision when they decided that we were not going to give a credit bump. And I said, an AP class is advanced placement. That's a college course. These kids are actually taking a college course. Why would we not give them that extra credit? Now, my colleagues were dead wrong. And when someone asked me about it later, my comment was not, hey, they're dead wrong. My comment was, the board felt that we couldn't control the quality of the teaching in an organization that doesn't belong to us, it doesn't pertain to us. We don't know the rigor, we don't know the standards. We'll take the credit, but they get the actual grade credit. That's what the board decided. Now, I could have sandbagged all my colleagues and said they were just wrong, right? I still think they're wrong, but I didn't have the votes. Okay, so stand in solidarity, even if you don't agree with it. There are ways you can express your disagreement without undermining the rest of the council. Okay? Requests for action or information, this is problematic. All requests for action should be directed to the town manager. If you have something you want done, you need to talk to the town manager about it. And it may be something that has to come before the council, because just one of you doesn't get to direct how the town operates. Okay, this is a council manager style of government, which is nice in that, because there are some other forms of government, council administrator form of government, where all the department heads report to the council. So you have a town administrator or a city administrator who's trying to direct the town, yet these department heads, they don't hire them, they don't fire them, and they technically can't really direct them, although they're responsible for the whole organization. It's kind of a mess, right? So if you have any issues that you want to see happen, talk to the town manager, okay? And that's where it should go. Council members are prohibited from giving direction to town employees. And I will tell you, this also includes contractors in a not so hypothetical situation. I don't have to make this stuff up. I could write a book and people would say, there's no way all of this actually happened. And I witnessed all of it. A board member for an airport that I represent went to one of the contractors who was doing a major remodel and directed changes to the model. Unbeknownst to that board member, those changes did not comply with FAA regulations. And when the inspection came about, they looked at it and said, what in the world did you build? Well, we did exactly what that board member told us. We made these changes because that board member directed us to. They were here for like 2 weeks on the job. Unbeknownst to anybody else, it was a several $100,000 problem, $100,000+ problem that the airport ultimately paid for because they directed a contractor to do something contrary to the plans, contrary to what the board had decided. Okay, so it's a bad idea. Don't do that. Requests for information should go through the town manager unless it's truly minor. And what I mean by that is this. If you bump into, for example, one of the building officials, and you say, hey, I saw some construction going on one of these lots over here. Any idea what's going on? They can tell you, no problem. A different scenario that you should not do is, hey, I saw some construction going on over here. Who approved that? That should have never been approved. See the difference? Inquiring as to something just for basic information is one thing. Giving direction about how things should happen, not a good idea. Right? Okay. Lastly, requested information. If you request information from the town manager, and the town manager says, oh yeah, that's great, I'll dig into that, I'll get you the info, it's likely going to go to everybody. Because it should. Because others may have the same question, right? If you want to know about something that's going on, it's likely someone else wants to know about that same issue. Citizen complaints. If you get a complaint from a citizen regarding a town manager, regarding a town matter, you should direct that person to the town manager. If you get a complaint about a town manager, you should also direct that person to the town manager. But if it's a town-related issue, I would caution you against picking up the phone and calling department heads and subordinates saying, hey, what's going on here? Hey, I talked to Joe, so-and-so over here on the street, and man, they have an issue with the sidewalk, and how come you guys don't have that fixed? I thought we talked about that a while ago. This is like the 4th call I've made to you on this. This stuff should go to the town manager. Let the town manager handle it. And then he'll also report back to you and let you know what was going on.
So if someone, and I had this happen just a couple weeks ago, they just said that, they had an issue with something in the roads, and I said, the best person for you to go talk to would be Mark Maddox if he's available. You can
That's
walk
great
in,
too.
You can walk in the town hall and see if he's available, and he's the one that would know the answer to that.
That's good too. The wrong answer would be, oh, you know what? Let me call Mark Maddox right now. Right? That was great. Direct them to Mark Maddox. And again, you can also sometimes, sometimes you can shoot an email or something saying, hey, I sent so-and-so to you. They've got a problem with X.
Right.
Not a problem. But again, what you shouldn't do is try and inject yourself into the solution of that problem. That's where issues are created.
And I always tell them, if I do that, I always say, I have no skin in the game, I know nothing, it's your issue.
Yep.
You take care of it, I'm just sending
Yeah.
it to you, so.
This is the problem here is when you make promises of action by the town. Gosh, I'm going to get that problem fixed for you. I will take this matter on. Don't promise something's going to happen. You can direct them to the town manager. You can even call the town manager and say, hey, I'm sending so-and-so over to you. Can you work on this issue? Because I think it's a big one. Great. But then let the process work.
I have a question.
Yes.
I'm sure this would never, ever happen. But let's say we were to get a complaint regarding the town manager.
Yep.
And I'm sure it would never happen. So what's the best course of action?
It happened last week.
Go to the, like, have a conversation with the mayor and say, look, here's the complaint. Do we want to meet in closed session and discuss it with everybody? Or how would you do that?
So it's going to depend on what the complaint is about the town manager, right, and how serious it is. You can request that the mayor put on for closed session an evaluation of the town manager regarding some citizen complaint. I don't know that really, you would have to be a pretty serious issue to do that. What I would suggest is the initial response, if you get a complaint about someone said, hey, I talked to the town manager, it's been 5 weeks, I got no follow-up from the town manager,
I would just go ahead.
and he's ghosting me. I've sent him emails, he's not calling me, I've called him 18 times, he won't call me back. Okay, then you can say, call the town manager and say, hey, I got this complaint from a citizen that they've called you, they've emailed you, they've sent postcards, letters, and no response. What's the deal, right? If it's something along the lines of, hey, we think there's fraud going on or embezzlement going on, or not that you would ever do that. I'm talking totally hypothetical. Then you may want to put, well, first off, if it's illegal activity, you're probably going to want to call me about that. We can put that on closed session. We can also do some investigating as well. But I think you need to manage or sort of gauge the severity of the complaint. If the complaint is something that may affect employment, yeah, you're going to want to put that on for closed session. If the complaint is something like, hey, you're not dealing with the town's citizenry very well, then I think that's something that can be a direct conversation.
And I think it's important to remember is the town attorney is separated from the town manager.
Right.
So the town attorney works for the council.
Yep.
That's where I would definitely, if you felt like there was impropriety on my side, sexual harassment or fraud or something, I would definitely say that is a direct connect to the town attorney.
Yeah, you have two employees, town manager and town council. And you have the ability to contact either one at any time to get direction on what to do.
So I had a situation where they kept coming saying, they're not doing anything, they're not doing anything, they're not doing anything. And I finally just said, you and I are gonna go meet with them together. And that way I can listen to your complaints and what you're talking about. And
Yeah.
it turned out to be not that big a deal.
Yeah,
But it was something that I had to actually get it done. I mean, it kept coming back, so, I mean, that's all right.
that's okay. If it is someone below the town manager, what I would suggest is involve the town manager in that discussion as
Yes,
well.
and we did.
Yeah,
Yes.
then absolutely okay.
Okay.
Absolutely okay. Particularly if you're just listening. Now, if
Yes,
you're in,
that's what I'm doing.
yeah, now if you're in the meeting dictating, the resolution, that's a problem. But you see, it's always a matter of sort of how the facts lay out. So, I got it within 6 minutes.
Did good. So one thing I want to say is, thank you, Scott, for getting through that so
Yes,
quickly.
Thank you, Scott.
You
If
bet.
there is areas that we want further explanation on, I think Scott's willing to kind of maybe do these kind of brief little updates at any time, so we can maybe delve into deeper details behind an issue or
Yeah.
just overall training for you moving forward.
I appreciate it. I think this is very good for us to review every year. I think it's,
By the way, I do want to mention one thing that's really important. This is a big change that is coming about as of January 1. Political donations to board members and special district members previously would result in a disqualification of that individual board member from taking action on an item related to the person who gave them the gift. Beginning January 1, that will also apply now to council members. So if a developer writes you a check to your political campaign of $500, $1,000, whatever the limit is, on $1,000, and you disclose it on a Form 700 or Form 460, right? You disclose that campaign donation for 12 months from the date of that donation, you cannot take any action on an item related to that developer.
Is this law retroactive? In other words, if the donation was this year,
You're just getting to my next point. That was a big concern because this law passed in, I want to say September. And the FPPC just issued an opinion. 2 weeks ago, they voted on the resolution. The written opinion has not yet come out, but it is forthcoming, that says it is not retroactive. And that was a big deal because a lot of council members are saying, wait a minute, I just raised a bunch of money for a campaign I just had to run, and now you're saying I can't vote on, and if it's retroactive, I voted on stuff for them 3 months ago. So how do I now comply? Because I already voted on that stuff. So if it's retroactive, that's going to be problematic. And recognizing that that's absurd, you couldn't proactively say, okay, I'm going to not vote on this 3 months ago because the legislature might make a law that would make this prohibited. They wisely said, yeah, it's going to not be retroactive. It's going to go from January 1 and forward. But understand, as of January 1, political campaign donations will disqualify you from voting on an item that is related to the donor
For a year.
for 1 year, 12 months from the date of the donation.
So what if it's a PAC that you have nothing to do with?
It would still be, you would still be disqualified from voting on anything related to the PAC. However,
But you might not even know who's in the PAC.
I have seldom seen PACs that have legislation or item. They're not developing property. They're not involved in zoning. They're involved strictly in issues, right? And what I would suggest is, I'm going to just pick a national issue that came about most recently. If some PAC donates money related to either a pro-choice or pro-life, item, then I would suggest if there is some item that comes before this council related to that you probably not vote on it. Is that going to happen? Highly doubt it. I highly
How
doubt.
would you even know?
That's the problem. And again, the PAC collects the money. You got money from the PAC. You didn't get it from all the individuals. So you would only be disqualified as to that political action committee itself. And again, they usually don't build buildings. They usually don't enter into leases with government. They usually just collect money and donate it. So you're not likely to be disqualified from anything.
I'm done.
you're done?
Don't ask any more questions.
So can,
Make an appointment.
if it's like another half to get all of our certificates signed off, mine's good for another year, so it doesn't matter. Why don't we just finish it up?
I'm happy to.
Okay, because I know Ron's gonna need it, and his
Thanks, Scott.
next
You bet.
opportunity might not be until.
Yeah, I'm happy to do it. There's also, I will tell you, there's also, the League of California Cities has some online stuff as well. That you
Oh,
can
did they
just,
put it online now?
yeah, they put it online. There's a bunch of places that have it online. So I'm happy to do it if you want, not a problem. But if you'd rather have the online thing, great.
Are we adjourned?
We're adjourned, according to Woody.
Thank you.
Well, you are now. 3 of them just left.
not a quorum.
Like it or not, you are adjourned.
gonna
No,
go
just
eat
leave your
there.
stuff, you can leave your stuff where you're at, we're just gonna eat in there and then come back.
Eat in there?
And then